Welcome back, Raider Nation. It's Joseph here for Zenny62. So maybe some of us thought that whole Derek Carr, Las Vegas Raiders situation would start to wane at this point. But leave it up to his brother, David Carr, who you see right in front of you, speaking in a recent podcast, or at least giving a little excerpt from a podcast called Harvester Podcast. Really quick about Harvester Podcast. Never heard of it. Really have no interest in it, but they tout themselves as being a podcast for the people. And it's based out of Central Valley, California, which obviously we know that's where the Carr brothers are from, and the Carr family are from Fresno, so maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe they have ownership in it, because I know both Derek and David tend to do a lot of their podcasts at this podcast place, the Harvester. Well, regardless of that, David went on to say how he's bringing up his brother and how the Raiders are actively trying to look for a trade for Derek Carr, which is interesting, but that Derek Carr has to approve it, right? So that kind of he said it in a very I guess this whole podcast, or this whole little excerpt, was a little sarcastic throughout the whole thing. He said that eventually that Derek and him are going to talk about what really happened. And I thought Derek already did that at his church speaking engagement. So I don't know why they have to keep pushing the issue. We know that there's always going to be part of Raider Nation that loved Derek Carr and hated to see him go. But at this point, let's move on. So with that, for those who, one day Derek Carr, I believe, will one day be a Raider again, and he'll retire as a Raider. And I think that history will allow that to happen. But if you keep pushing this narrative about, I'm going to tell you what really happened and behind the walls, and he even mentioned that Mark Davis tried to get rid of him once in a trade for him or something to that effect. And I don't remember ever David Carr being involved with the Raiders. But regardless of that, his big brother will not let this go. And maybe if you have family, maybe that's what you want. Someone to speak on your behalf when you know you can't. According to Derek, that he has to turn the page, be better himself, and not let that negativity, surround his life. He even mentioned that he has family trying to speak on his behalf, which he didn't really, I'm sure he appreciated as a younger brother, but he wanted to move forward and let this all go and blah, blah, blah. But obviously, David took a different direction. Again, he's on this podcast giving a excerpt about how they're all going to get together and they're going to tell you what really happened behind the scenes. Now, I don't know if that's good for Derek moving forward, because if you're telling about inner workings about an organization, what organization is going to want you to be on their football team if you're just going to eventually go out on your own and talk smack about that team and talk about the inner workings or what happens in the locker room, when all the time you have Derek saying we keep whatever's in the locker room and to ourselves. So I don't know what inner workings he's talking about that he's going to unveil and talk with Derek. But obviously David Carr seems a lot more upset about this than Derek, but maybe they're both in cahoots. I don't know. So we'll see what happens. Those of you who want to see it, you can find this video on Twitter. Just look up David Carr and you'll find it on Twitter. Now, what I find interesting is that I'm wondering if this constant either berating or kind of pushing this whole negative narrative with regards to what happened to his brother with the Raiders is actually going to affect him on the NFL Network. Because think about it. If you have a figurehead or someone that represents NFL Network or that's on one of your broadcasts, and he's outside doing side things that maybe wouldn't be the best thing for the NFL Network or the network itself, how long will this continue before he's asked to not do this anymore? So we'll see what happens. So keep it here on Zany62 and don't forget to like and subscribe.